evolving squad of efficiently.
Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Investigators continue searching for victims after a Swiss ski resort bar fire that killed around 40 people and injured more than 100. With doctors treating severe burn cases, officials say identification could take days or weeks as the cause remains unclear and forensic teams work at the scene. Ukraine says its forces only struck military targets after Russia claims a drone attack in occupied southern Ukraine killed 27 civilians. A military spokesperson says Kyiv adheres to international humanitarian law. Hong Kong's anti-graft agency arrests 21 people over suspected corruption linked to renovation projects at 2 housing estates. Authorities say the action follows a wider crackdown after a deadly high-rise fire and includes allegations of bribery and bid manipulation. The Israeli military says it intercepts a false target in Bahrain after drone sirens sound, while Hezbollah sources deny involvement. The incident comes as pressure grows on Lebanon to disarm Hezbollah under a possible truce deal. Authorities in Yemen's Hadramaut launched a peaceful operation to take back bases following a separatist advance. The governor says the move is not a declaration of war and aims to restore control. US President Donald Trump says the United States will intervene if Iran kills peaceful protesters. Ongoing unrest in Iran is seeing reported deaths and injuries amid economic protests, including casualties in Lorestan. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro says he's open to negotiating with the United States on combating drug trafficking. He strikes a more conciliatory tone towards Washington, even as he remains silent on reports of a recent CIA-led strike. China says President Xi will host South Korean President Lee Jae-myung from Sunday, signaling a push to strengthen ties. It is their second meeting in 2 months, with Beijing emphasizing economic cooperation and tourism amid regional strains. Now for this hour, we start with Iran. Iranian authorities in Tehran have arrested 30 suspects accused of public order offenses. After days of protests against high prices that have at times turned deadly, the protests have left at least 7 people dead, including protesters and a Basij volunteer. Fatalities occurred in cities such as Azna, Lordigan, Fuldashahar, and Kodasht, largely home to the Lur ethnic group. The unrest, which were driven by inflation and collapsing currency, is the largest since 2022. These demonstrators continue to voice discontent with the Iranian government, highlighting both economic and political grievances. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Soul Satka. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Satka, for joining us, and Happy New Year to you. Now, thank you. Now, looking at this, it's very dangerous, and also the escalation that's been going on with the protests in Iran. How should government facilitate this controlling the protests so that it does not escalate further? And also, what should the demonstrators be careful about?
Well, it's an unusual question. The protests in Iran are merely the culmination of protests that have been continuing for 48 years at this point, since the Iranian Islamic regime took power, and have persecuted their people with executions, privations, control, limits on what they can wear, limits on who they can associate with, and execution of thousands of people every year. The Islamic regime in Iran is one of the most evil regimes on the planet. They are the source of much of the terrorism that plagues much of the world, including in India. the demise of the Iranian regime has been long predicted, and there have been many false dawns in the past where protest movements have risen up and have been crushed by the regime. It could be this time will be the final nail in the coffin for the extremely weak regime. As you mentioned, their currency has collapsed. If you would go back to 1979 when they took over and you wanted to buy an ounce of gold, you would have to pay 15,000 Iranian riyals. If you wanted to do the same thing today, it would be approximately 7 billion. So they have reduced the value of their own currency via their theocratic regime by 99.9999%. That's how badly they have done for Iran. The Iranian birth rate has collapsed. They don't have a future generation at this point. The brightest people emigrate or have already emigrated decades ago. They have no water left because of the corruption in the water management of that country, where the water has been given to well-connected people who want to open farms that are totally unproductive. They have no food, they have no water, their electricity system is collapsed, even though they are blessed with some of the largest reserves of petroleum and natural gas in the world. They don't have enough gas. Everything is in chaos there and has been for years, and that's what happens when you have this kind of totalitarian regime inevitably. And we can only pray that this generation that is now rising up, the third generation since the revolution, will have the ability to overthrow the regime. And hopefully what we saw, the message from Donald Trump that was timed for Friday prayers in Iran for maximum impact, hopefully what we will see is that that will give them a certain confidence to go after the regime in a more aggressive way, and it will give the regime apparatchiks fear that if they do respond with violence to the protesters, they themselves will end up with an American missile on their head. And they saw what that can mean 6 months ago when America, without almost any effort on its part, destroyed what Iran spent 40 years building up in terms of the nuclear program. So the idea on the one hand from the Americans is to deter the Iranian regime from standing up to the protesters, and on the other hand, encourage the protesters to continue their protests. And hopefully, if that happens, we'll have an entirely new Middle East, because much of the chaos, most of the chaos, for sure, that exists in the region between Afghanistan and Syria, most of the wars from Gaza to Yemen are all funded and supported by Iran. They, in order to preserve their own power, have been sowing chaos across the Middle East for decades. The Iranian people are some of the bravest and brightest and most educated people in the region, and wherever they go in the world, they succeed prolifically. And there's no doubt in my mind that with the regime gone, not only will Iran become a source of peace and wisdom, but they will become the hub of future technology and success.
Thank you for highlighting that, Mr. Sadka. And although the dialogue between Iran's government right now and the demonstration leaders, protest leaders hasn't taken place, do you think it will take place, and what do you think could come out of it? Or do you think nothing would change, just like how we saw with a few years ago, Mahsa Amini protest? Iranian government did discuss with the protest leaders, and nothing really changed.
Yeah, and the protesters are under no illusions that anything will change in particular. I'm in touch with some of them. The fact that the Iranian regime is trying to talk to the protesters, to negotiate with them, to answer some of their complaints, really only exposes how weak they are, that they feel that they need to do that. That rather implies that. Whether the protesters have the wherewithal to overthrow this extremely well-bedded in regime is unknowable, and we can only wish them luck. We can only wish them luck. And that's what Trump did today, actually. We wish them luck, and hopefully they can overthrow the regime, because really, apart from the Iranian people, no one else can do it. Iran is too large a country. No one is going to send in troops on the ground to overthrow the regime. They can only be assisted on the margins with at most airstrikes, which Trump actually promised to do if Iran attacked the protesters. My guess is there will be no accommodation between the protesters and the regime, only because in reality, the problems that Iran has right now are so deeply rooted in terms of no water, no electricity, no services, no money. Their currency is devalued to dust. In other words, their currency is currently as cheap as toilet paper. So what can they offer the protesters? They've destroyed their economy. They've persecuted their people. Almost everyone hates them. So what can they offer them? They've got nothing to offer them. They can't buy them off anymore. In the past, they could buy them off. There's nothing left to spend to buy off. So either this is the final round of protests and will overthrow the regime, or inevitably in a year or 2 years, at some point this regime is going, and the sooner the better.
Yes, sooner the better. Thank you for highlighting that, Mr. Sadka. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we move on to Middle East. The Israeli military has reported that it has intercepted a false target in Baram in northern Israel after sirens were triggered by a suspected drone. Authorities said the device posed no immediate threat. A source close to Lebanon's Hezbollah said that the Iran-aligned group was not involved in this incident. Tensions remain high in the region, with Israel closely monitoring cross-border activity. Lebanon continues to face pressure from the United States and Israel to disarm Hezbollah under an existing truce agreement. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has warned that Israel would act as necessary if Beirut fails to curb the group's arsenal. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Sol Sadka. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Sadka, for staying with us. Now looking at this, what more can you tell us about this latest disruption?
There are regular, over the past 2 years, there have been regular alerts. Occasionally you'll get a false alarm. Apparently this bomb was set off by a flock of birds, a particularly dense flock of birds that was mistaken for a drone. And apparently that set off some sirens which disturbed the lives of a few people for 10 minutes. But it's not a major issue, and it's something that can happen on a regular basis whenever you have a air defense system active.
Right, thank you for sharing that. And you know, as you mentioned, like this is a regular thing. How do you think, how should Israeli forces maybe advance these alert system better so that it doesn't mistake, it can differentiate between birds and some targets that are not necessary danger?
Right. Well, of course, you know, when you have a radar system, you're always going to have errors. The Israeli defense system, the rocket defense system, the drone defense system has approximately a 90 to 95% success rate, but you're always going to get false negatives. And as you encounter new threats or new false threats, such as a flock of birds in a particular configuration, you're able to train your radar detection systems to learn more. But once in a while, you're always going to have this kind of event. But like I said, it's not a particularly onerous event. It just means that people hear an alarm, and 5 minutes later, the alarm expires. They have to go and hide in a safe room for those 5 minutes. There's really nothing that you can do to prevent false positives entirely, but I'm sure that the Israelis will be examining what caused this false alert in detail to ensure that it will happen as little as possible going forward.
Right. Do you see the level of alertness change after, October 2023 Hamas attack between IDF and also between Israeli people? Do they take, although you said, the radar detection system once in a while, although mostly successful, once in a while does have false alarms and people just pause for like 10 minutes or so and then they go back to normal. Do you think things have changed after that attack?
Absolutely. The events of October 7, 2023, when alarms rang all day and then continually every hour almost for weeks afterwards, until Hamas had depleted the majority of their rocket stocks, really shook the Israeli public, and they learned to take these things much more seriously than they had previously. No question at all. As everyone knew someone who had lost their home or lost a relative, they understood that it was no longer a joke. People took it much more seriously. And again in June, when there was the 12-day war with Iran, the rockets that Iran was sending over weren't like the rockets that Hamas or Hezbollah sent over. These were rockets with the size of a bus, with a full carload of explosives, and they were coming in at 10 times the speed of sound, like a star. So whereas some people would occasionally break the rules and stand on their rooftops filming the Hamas rockets, knowing that if they saw one coming, they could probably get to cover in time, no one had any illusions that they could do that against one of these intercontinental missiles from Iran, which came directly out of the heavens like a bolt of lightning. So that really got people thinking, and people took it very seriously during the Iran war.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Satka for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. To Asia, Hong Kong's anti-graft agency has arrested 21 people in a major corruption probe tied to building renovations. The ICAC says the suspects are linked to a trial-connected syndicate. They include middlemen, consultants, contractors, and owners' committee members. Investigators alleged bribes were paid to secure a renovation contract worth 33 million Hong Kong dollars. In another case, votes were allegedly manipulated using corrupt proxy authorizations. The arrests follow a deadly fire in late November that has killed more than 160 people in Hong Kong. Authorities say substandard renovation materials helped fuel that blaze. City leader John Lee has formed an independent panel to probe the fire, the industry, and possible bid rigging. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Andrew K.P. Long. He's a China strategist, joins us live from Hong Kong. Thank you very much, Mr. Long, for joining us once again, and Happy New Year to you. Now, looking at this, what more can you tell us about this, the latest probe and the latest arrest over corruption? And do you think that the last fire that happened in November has maybe encouraged these kind of things to be taken more seriously in China or Hong Kong?
Well, Hong Kong is a city noted for its high-rise buildings, residential buildings, as well as commercial buildings, but residential buildings mainly. And it covers a wide range of sectors, from the most expensive to the affordable housing for the ordinary people and public housing. Because Hong Kong is such a small place, so there are a lot of high rises, and then some of the buildings have been there for a long time. And over, say, about a couple of decades ago, there was a requirement that most of these buildings need to be renovated after about 20 years. That opened up a huge market for renovation. And then the problem of collusion and corruption crept in. Usually they operate as a kind of syndicate, and forming allying with contractors, as well as so-called technical advisors on these renovation projects, playing on the technical lack of expertise of individual owners. And the owners usually form a management committee, and they are supposed to collect the funds from the residents for this renovation. And then through the infiltration into these committees, and also the collusion with contractors, with technical advisors, they're able to secure the contract apparently on a fair basis, but actually with proxy bids and so on, therefore milking the individual owners of their money by delivering inflated project costs. And of course that there was a lack of supervision overall, resulting in a supply of substandard materials and non-compliance with fire retardant materials and so on. And in fact, that the existing rules and regulations on fire retardants that maybe is not in keeping with the kind of material used in the sector. So there's a huge problem there, and that's why the fire has exposed all these dynamics, and the government has established an independent judge-led committee to look into all this, together with the independent commission against corruption, and hence these latest arrests.
Right. So, how do you think how should now moving forward? How should the government balance criminal enforcement and more strict regulatory reform?
Well, it's only not just a question of collusion and corruption and with these contractors. It's also the question, as I highlighted just now, whether the existing regulations, or technical regulations on fire retardant material used in the scaffolding in renovation are up to date and up to the standards required, whether the fire-saving equipment, including the water pressure, are sufficient to reach the heights of some of these high-rises buildings, whether the firefighting vehicles can negotiate the narrow streets in case of a fire emergency, because Hong Kong is very congested, and the limitation of these streets sometimes would restrict the ability of fire engines or of sufficient size, and indeed whether the water pressure is sufficient to reach a certain height, because some of these high rises go to over nearly 100 stories. So there are lots of other issues involved. And the government is coming to grips on it, because it's not just a question of Hong Kong. The situation is being watched worldwide, across, not least on the mainland itself, because on the Chinese mainland there are many other cities with high rises. In fact, as soon as the fire happened, Beijing ordered all the cities on the Chinese mainland do an immediate checkup on their fire safety measures, and hence putting a lot of emphasis on getting to the bottom of this fire, with the result of coming up more robust system to prevent the reoccurrence of similar tragedies.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Andrew K.P. Long for joining us today as a China strategist from Hong Kong. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Europe. Investigators are continuing to search for victims of a fire at Lee Constellation Bar in the Swiss ski resort of Crans-Montana. As per reports, around 40 people have passed away and 115 people have been injured in the tragedy. While it is not yet clear what caused the fire, but eyewitnesses have described the speed at which it spread and the chaos that ensued. Swiss President Guy Parmelin has said that the blaze is one of the worst tragedies that our country has experienced. Let's listen in.
Siento tantísimo, para mí ha estado un shock, que bueno, todos venimos de vacaciones a pasar un momento feliz y encontrarnos con una situación así muy triste, bien triste. Sí, conocer.
Now we move on to UK. Britain's benchmark Financial Times Stock Exchange 100 index has crossed the 10,000 mark for the first time. Meanwhile, the milestone was reached on the first trading day of 2026, with the index rising by about 0.7%. The blue chip index has gained nearly 22% in 2025, its strongest annual performance since 2009. However, gains were driven by global market rallies, defense stocks, banks, and miners, despite limited exposure to artificial intelligence. The move is being seen as a confidence boost for UK markets, which have faced years of political uncertainty, Brexit pressures, and debt concerns. Now we move on to our next news. Poor sales of Apple have reportedly forced Apple to cut production of the Vision Pro headset. The tech company has also reduced marketing for Vision Pro by more than 95% last year. Reports say Apple cut production and reduced marketing by over 95%. Analysts estimate only about 45,000 units were sold in the last quarter, and production reportedly stopped in early 2025. The headset costs over $3,000, and many users found it heavy, uncomfortable, and more of a gimmick than a must-have device. Limited apps and niche appeal also reduced the interest. Apple is expected to release a cheaper version of Vision Pro later this year, but the emphasis now is on AI-enabled devices. Apple's 2023 Vision Pro faced criticism for high price, discomfort, limited use, and safety concerns while driving. Mark Zuckerberg's Meta is also expected to cut back on its plans for a metaverse, which includes its virtual reality Quest headsets. Apple has refused to comment on the reports that it is scaling back virtual reality headsets. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.